Plugged In dives deep into the ever-evolving world of technology with a special emphasis on how it intersects with our daily lives, businesses, and the broader society. Guided by Mark Sefton, a globally renowned personal mentor to entrepreneurs and a passionate technophile, this podcast unravels the complexities of the tech world, offering listeners insights that are both profound and practical. With Mark's rich experience, having interviewed some of the most influential individuals across various platforms, expect to embark on a journey of discovery, innovation, and digital mastery. Welcome to Plugged In.
Welcome back to the Plugged In podcast, where we dive deep into the intersection of technology, business, and real human strategy. If you're a founder, a CEO, or a marketing executive navigating the current landscape, you already know that the market is absolutely flooded with generic AI-generated noise. The real challenge in 2026 isn't finding tools to scale faster, it's scaling without losing your brand's unique soul and authenticity. And joining us today is Bradley Skaggs, the co-founder of Skaggs Creative. Bradley and his team don't just act as a standard executive agency. They partner directly with executive teams to build foundational, structural, sound brands. Today, we are moving past the AI hype to look at practical adoption, the human judgment layer, and what it actually takes to maintain a premium, high-touch creative edge in a real commoditized world. Bradley, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Good to have you, and thoroughly enjoying these Plugged In podcasts. I find it incredible. I host 3 different podcasts, Bradley, for like 3 different companies and brands, and yet this one, the AI one, the technology one, is the best performing. Is that a surprise to you?
Given all the hype around it? No, not really. But yeah, maybe a little bit. Yeah, sure.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think you've still got people that are skeptical. You've still got people that are not wanting to accept that it's here to stay.
It is
kind of a new neighbor that's moved in and their music's on too loud, and you're kind of trying to adjust to it.
Yeah, it's more like a new development next door that's not going to go away, like a neighbor might, right? It's there to stay.
Yeah,
and it's probably bigger development than should be in the neighborhood in a way. So, and like all the developments, I guess if you use that as the analogy, they come with their good and their bad, right? So, trying to sift through it and all the noise that's around it right now, I think is a really important thing to be doing. Both for founders and brands as a whole. So
I think, using that neighbor analogy, the best way to kind of probably influence that is to actually become friends with that neighbor.
Exactly.
Because then when you say your music's too loud, they're not going to put a knife to your throat.
They're going to turn it up.
Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. So then we've got to use and we've got to utilize and we've got to use AI to help serve us rather than seeing it as that annoying neighbor.
Exactly. Yeah, I think, as we've talked about, you've talked about, I've talked about, there are, of course, really positive advantages to it. I think it's one of those things, though, it's a tool. And like all tools, you have to be careful how you use them and you have to learn how to use them and you have to use the right tool for the right project, so to speak. So, and that just requires judgment. And I think that's probably what's lacking most in what's coming out of AI right now.
Yeah. Now, your studio focuses on working with founders and executive teams who are explicitly looking for that creative partner rather than just another standard marketing agency. For a
Correct.
CEO or a CMO that's maybe tuning in, Bradley, what is the practical, maybe day-to-day difference between hiring an agency to execute a brief versus bringing in a creative partner like yourself? And how does that distinction alter the actual business outcomes?
We start at the root, basically. And I think a lot of times creatives are brought into here, make this or do that or do this. And they take at face value a lot what's been given to them. I'll do that too, of course, that's my job, but I also will question it because I think ultimately that's what they want is to be challenged. Not in a negative way, but in a way that just says, look, maybe you should consider this too, or there's an opportunity here that you didn't see. And this is where the AI gets interesting because it can help find that sort of stuff a lot faster than the old days. And I think it takes a little bit of the subjectivity out of it because you can factually back it up. It's up to you though to go check those facts and make sure they're true. But we instead of spending a month doing market research or something like that, we can do it in a day and spend the rest of the month sifting through it, figuring out what's right, what's wrong, where there's an opportunity, what's BS, and really use it as a to our advantage. And I think it provides. I know it provides a much more cohesive and enhanced deliverable.
Good. Now, you and your
Yeah.
co-founder, is your co-founder Janina? Is that right?
Yeah. Yonina. Yeah.
Janina? You both have a background in architecture.
That's
And
correct.
you've both spoken before about building brands the same way architects build buildings, foundation first, structure second, aesthetics last. I mean, I think obviously being in New York, like all those skyscrapers, it's like, I've often thought about, that as a great analogy where you think they're so high up in the air, but how deep do the roots have to be able to hold something? And I
Yeah.
think it's a great metaphor for in life. You see people achieving great things above the surface, but you
Yeah.
haven't seen what they've had to go through, like in the
Yeah.
depths, So
Yeah.
I'm kind of going on a bit of a segue there, but I had to share
That's
that.
fine.
It's always
No, and
fascinating.
if you look at the skyline of Manhattan, for example, there's tall buildings in Lower Manhattan and there's tall buildings in Midtown Manhattan, and there's nothing in between. And the reason is because there's no strong bedrock in that in between zone to really build and anchor up a building on. And same thing applies for a brand. You've got to have this foundation, and I think that foundation must be rooted in the core truth of the brand. Because if it's not, it just becomes, to keep the building analogy, it's the difference between renovating a house and just painting the room. You haven't changed the functionality of the room. You've just made it look a little bit different. Maybe that's enough. I think in a lot of brands, it's not enough. You need to realize that if we took this wall down and did this, then we would open this up and this would allow that to happen and so on and so forth. And there's a very similarity between, I think, how you build a brand.
Yeah. And where I was going with that is like when you audit a brand, Bradley, like that's maybe struggling to really connect with its market, its customer, its client. Where do you typically see maybe that structural foundation really failing, even if the visual design looks beautiful on the surface?
Most of the time, it is a brand owns a lot more than it talks about. And when they do talk about it, what I mean by that is maybe there's a patent, maybe there's a scientific process, maybe there's a formulation story, maybe there's something about the founder that's unique and different. And this information tends to get buried on the about page or deep on the science page or in a white paper or something like that. It's not on the front page, the homepage, where it should be, because these are the things that differentiate the brand from everybody else. And I think a lot of brands fall into this commodity trap of, well, this is the vocabulary that everybody else is using. We should use it too. And all you've done there is just make yourself try to be better by using the same thing, and it never works. There are things a brand owns that they should be talking about in their own way, with their own language, and that becomes ownable. It's no longer borrowed language, right? It's owned language. And I think that's where you start to see a real difference in the brands that succeed, because they then become the ones that everybody else starts to copy. And that gives you, that's a much better position to be in than just another Me Too brand that somehow thinks a unicorn's going to pop out of that and they're going to sell the brand for $1 billion. It just doesn't happen that way, right? If you look at the ones that are most successful, they did it their own way. And that's why. So I think you just got to be very careful. I just think brands, I don't know why they do it exactly. Like, I don't know if they're just afraid of it or if it just doesn't feel right, but I can't tell you how many brands we come across when we do our gap analysis. And we find things that are just like right there that are so important and so unique and so different that if they just put it out there, it would make a difference. And the ones we have, it does make a difference. So, the proof is kind of in the pudding.
Yeah.
So,
I enjoy the whole hood under brand and branding and how you're perceived and how you show up. I'm fascinated by it, because it's interesting to me. It's a story. It's a calling card. It's a painting, and we all see different things from when we look at it. And it is fascinating. And obviously, right now, the marketing industry is flooded with lots of AI hype. But I've noticed that you've really taken a very grounded approach, noting that AI really excels at pattern recognition, but can actually make brand imitation worse if it's left unchecked.
Yeah.
And how can marketing executives maybe leverage AI for broad data gathering and intelligence without maybe tipping into stripping away that authentic human creative side that makes a brand unique?
Well, first of all, I think a brand, unlike a painting, shouldn't have multiple interpretations. It should be, no matter where you're touching it, communicating the same core truth and idea. And that's, I think, a lot of times where the problems pop up. What's been said on the homepage is not the same message that's happening through social media, is not the same thing that's happening on the packaging or what's happening in the retail environment, right? They're all slightly different, which just builds confusion in the mind of the consumer. So bringing that all together, this is where AI actually makes the problem worse, because if you're not treating the prompt like a creative brief, it's not going to give you what you want, right? You've got to, junk going in equals junk going out. The better that goes in, the better it's going to come out. So I think it's, again, really focusing on what you're trying to get the AI to tell you, because it will always tell you what you want to hear. And I think half the trick too is to negatively prompt it and have it play the devil's advocate after you run through a series of it and say, okay, so now what's missing? And if you were, an investor sitting on the board looking at this, where would your questions pop up? And if you're the buyer in retail, where would you have questions? And then kind of role play it to see where it finds the holes in what is created.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's not just a prompt, right? It's a whole process. And I think that process is the most important part, because if that process is right and you come out with a real strategy and a brand positioning, then all the creative you put on top of it has a reason.
Yeah.
And it all ladders back up to that core idea.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of brands either miss it or don't. They're in too big a hurry to do it, or I don't know what it is, but I see it.
Yeah. I like
it's
to
not
tell
a
it
tough
off.
fix.
I like to tell it off, Bradley. Like if I'm using ChatGPT or one of the others and I'll ask it and it'll give me some information, I'll just say that's not good enough.
Exactly.
Because I know
Yeah.
that it's only operating at about 60% accuracy, and then it says, "Oh yeah, sorry, I was being lazy." It's like, I don't want lazy.
No, stop being lazy. But I
Yeah.
think that's also important why when you start a project, for example, in Claude, you've got to define the instructions. And there's no reason to start the questions from blank. Have it write the first set of instructions. And then as you come across these things like that, where I don't like that, add it to the instructions so it knows not to do that. And then eventually you get it really honed in where it knows how to do it. And or take that output and stow it in another chat and see what it says, and then push it back to the first one and say, look, Jim and I said this. It tends to piss off the AI, and it's kind of funny.
Yeah. You can kind of create a little Cluedo with
Yeah, exactly.
with AI.
Yeah, exactly. Get them fighting and then see if you get a better output.
That's right. It's almost like, I reckon make a great movie, rather than the Hunger Games.
Right.
You could have the
AI games. That'd be
I reckon
hilarious.
we're onto something there.
We
Bradley.
should try that. Yeah, let's do that next.
We should, yeah.
But you see, it's just funny how it, I don't know. You've got to be somewhat fascinated with it too. And you have to want to understand how it works. To get something out of it. Like it's not going to do it for you.
I reckon somebody's probably going to take what they've just heard there, because it would make a great movie, wouldn't it? Here's Claude, and he's like,
it would be hilarious. Yeah. Yeah. In the right corner. Yeah.
It would be hilarious. It's quite a good idea though.
Do it. Have AI do it for you.
Exactly. Yeah. Make me a movie. This is rubbish. Now, you've developed a process called the leak and the pivot to identify the gap between what a brand is actually worth and what it is communicating to the public. How has integrating AI into your workflow accelerated this forensic discovery phase for your clients? And what does the subsequent human judgment layer look like once that data is gathered?
We talked about it a little bit earlier, but it's that idea of that initial research. Understanding, what's happening in the marketplace. Who are the real competitors of the brand? Often brands think their competitors are X, Y, and Z when they're maybe X and Y are correct, but there's also D and E over here who are doing something really innovative that just isn't on the radar yet. And AI can help find that sort of stuff. As well as where a white space might lie. So if it can kind of look at what's happening across different markets and projections and past ideas or, results and things, help it to identify that. And then again, as we were talking about, it's the huge human judgment aspect. It's important to come back and analyze that and see if it makes sense. Because maybe it's not going to be right. I can tell you that. It may sound right and it may look right, but it's not right. There's always going to be something in it that's got to be verified and looked at it.
Yeah.
I always laugh a little bit when I watch these YouTube videos, these guys who like, I created a whole brand in 10 minutes. Like, I'm sure you did, but is it any good? Does it? I don't think so. You know what I mean? It needs that level of human judgment on top of it. Okay, the font style is interesting, but is it readable? No, it's too small.
Yeah.
Is it in the right position? No, the hierarchy should be this, this, and this, not the other way around. And that's where I think the human judgment needs to play in. I'm all for AI as a thinking partner, as a brainstorming partner, give me initial concept idea, but ultimately that output at the end's got to be human.
Yeah, here to serve.
At least human influenced.
Yeah, I think that really puts you in a nice space, Bradley. If I'm honest, like if I think of all the interviews I've done on Plugged In, some incredible minds, very engineering minded, very like deep in terms of their intellect and the way that they think. But I always think that, and we know it generically, that often geeks, if you like, may not always have that social etiquette that goes alongside it. A little bit awkward, a little bit kind of, you know what I mean? But the thing with you is you've got a really nice, like you sound believable, like you sound trustworthy, because you have a nice energy with this understanding as well.
Yeah, thank you. This is how it is. I didn't just start doing this yesterday. I've been doing it for years and years. And the studio started out as a graphic design studio, just doing basic graphic design work. And then we eventually we started in San Francisco, opened up the New York office. We're chasing some work from European clients. And it became clear that wasn't going to happen unless we had an office in New York. And so we did that. And that led us into the beauty space. And that was kind of the rest was more or less history. But I'm fortunate, I guess, in the sense that when we started this was the beginning of the .com boom. So I've seen this whole thing before, the rise and the fall of the .com and how it all played out. Is AI exactly the same? No, but it is following a similar trajectory in the sense that there's thousands of different models out there. There's going to be some consolidation. There's going to be some major players in the end. The novelty is going to wear off and it's going to end up being, a tool that's used for this, that, and the other thing. But far more powerful than we're probably even thinking. Right?
Yeah. We're talking
you've got to temper everything you do with this sort of understanding, right?
So, we're talking about brand, how it's not just aesthetics, because it's also like it's also the soul. It's the heartbeat, right?
Yeah.
Which is really kind of what I'm saying, reflecting back to you in terms of how you come across. I mean, it's a great example of what a brand is. It isn't just the way that you look or the way your business looks. It's also that essence. It's that vibration. It's that energy.
Exactly.
And that's why I think when you get it right, when you bring AI with humanity and you dovetail the two and they work in harmony, that's actually when it becomes a lot more meaningful and actually a lot more helpful.
I agree. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
It has to be. I think if you look at your favorite brand, I don't know what it is, but I think you would have a hard time describing it because there's something in here that it's resonating with that is hard to put into words, And I think that's just like it should be inevitable. It should just be so integral to what it is that it is hard to talk.
Yeah.
But at the same moment, the brand itself is able to present itself and have a conversation and be relatable and useful and everything else. So
yeah, it is definitely something that is fascinating. And I feel like if you really get it right, then it will really aid you and your business rather than, distract you. Now,
no, it should, right?
Exactly. One of the absolute standout philosophies at Skaggs Creative is that you personally lead every single engagement from start to finish. That was something that I really paid attention to there. There is no handling clients off to a B team or outsourcing in an industry where the bait and switch is relatively quite common. Why have you fiercely protected this as a founder and really focused on leading this from the front And how does it change the level of trust and final execution for global brands like Charlotte Tilbury, for example?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think first of all, it's really hard to run from that when it's your name on the door. You're kind of stuck in it, right? You have to be the front of the front. And I don't know. I think it's also just both of us, we've always just had a very hands-on approach in the first place. We're fortunate too, where we are now, that we can be a little bit picky about who we work with. I don't mean that egotistically. I just mean we've worked really hard to get to that position. And the brands that we do work with, I know that they appreciate this access. And I don't know. I think the other half of my job is sometimes being a therapist, honestly, because it's really hard to launch a brand. And even if you've launched it, to build it is even more difficult. And I think a lot of people get that wrong. They think that launching is the hard part and the building's going to happen. It's completely the way around. The build takes years, and it takes a lot more money and a lot more time than most people think. And again, there's a lot of noise out there to sort through. So, I think we've always just felt that if we work directly, her and I and the team, the team is the team and everybody's involved and they all know what's going on. The process goes a lot smoother. There's far less problems with communication, things getting lost in translation. It just seems so obvious to me. I don't know how else you could do it. I mean, I know how it's done because I hear the horror stories when clients do come to us after they've worked with somebody else and been handed off, and they see the founder in the first call and that's it. And that's all. It's just not how we wanted to do it. We've never done it that way. So.
Yeah. And interesting that I picked that up, like even from the first minute of just, speaking with you.
Well, I'm glad you did, because it's a really important thing. And I'm glad it came through. Yeah.
It did. It does.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. Now, you've advised growing companies to simplify and focus rather than trying to be everything to everyone, even sharing examples of brands that failed by expanding their product lines too quickly in new markets. For a business leader looking at their 2026 growth strategy, as we come into the second and third quarters, how do they really distinguish between a genuine expansion opportunity and a distraction that really kind of dilutes, their own core message?
There's not really a straight answer to that, because it really depends on the brand, the products, their market, what's happening in that market, and where it tends to go. But what I would say is that there seem to be these underwritten or unspoken rules about how a brand has to launch products all the time and do this and do that. And I don't buy into that idea all the time. I think every brand is unique. And if if you're doing ice cream and you can produce a new flavor every quarter, great. It doesn't mean you have to produce a lipstick every quarter. They're two very different things. And I think what a lot of brands have to realize is that every time you have another product, that's like having a whole nother child. Like you've got to give it attention and nurture it and help grow it and deal with its problems and everything like that. Right. So is it easier to build on 3 as opposed to 6? I mean, I'm not saying you should never grow the brand. I'm just saying, I think you need to take it step by step and really make sure it makes sense to do it. I think every brand should always have something in its back pocket ready to go when the opportunity arises. But this idea, like, do you really have to have a new car every year? I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but I just feel like some things don't need to be released every single year. I think there's a lot of waste in it. I think there's a lot of, I'd rather take, instead of doing another iPhone every year, why don't you spend the off year fixing the one before, then make it really a much, much better product so that the next release is 2 times better than the one before.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I noticed that in particular, like say with a computer game like FIFA, which I bought like when it first came out. And literally every year it would cost you another £60, but there weren't a whole lot, there wasn't a whole lot different.
No.
And I almost felt robbed.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like they could have just done a little patch for that.
Exactly. And why not just do it that way? Patch it for 2 years or whatever it is, and then do a full release that adds some real functionality to it. But I get it. Everything's moved, and we do it too, right? To more of an iterative approach. And I appreciate that. But that's different, because with an iterative approach to creative or even strategy, why not get it out there and test it before you go too far down that road to see if it even works or not, right? So in that case, we keep pushing it out there and I mean, you've got the world's biggest mood board in social media already. So just use it and find out what people think, bring it back, do the next version, so on and so forth. I don't think that lines up with every single thing, that needs to be done. So yeah.
True. Bradley, how do people find out more about you? Where do they go?
Skaggs.co is the first place to go. I'm on LinkedIn at Bradley Skaggs. That's probably the two best places to go.
Well, it's great to have you on today's show.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. It was a great time. I appreciate it.
Cheers.
All right. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to me, Mark Sefton, host of Plugged In on the Smart Tech Daily podcast. We'd be delighted if you'd leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify, and we look forward to welcoming you back to the next episode of the Plugged In podcast.